Welcome to So and So, brought to you by Bernina, Made to Create. I'm Meg Goodman, and you're about to enjoy a casual conversation with a special member of the sewist and quilting community. A conversation about how they got started, what inspires them, what excites them, and their connection to this community. Our guest today is Cookie Washington, a fourth-generation needleworker and award-winning and nationally exhibited textile artist. Born in Morocco, she's traveled extensively and has lived for the last 33 years in Charleston, South Carolina. Her mother, aunts, grandmother, and great-grandmother were all experienced dressmakers, fashion designers, and master tailors, but Cookie is the first in this long line of needleworkers to take up art quilting. Her current passion is fiber art muralism that celebrates the divine feminine and the contributions of her African ancestral heritage. For 16 years, Cookie has been guest curator of the African American Fiber Arts exhibit that is part of the North Charleston Arts Festival. One of Cookie's proudest accomplishments to date is having been selected as one of 44 master art quilters to create a quilt to honor President Barack Obama's inauguration in 2009. In addition, there are now more proud moments that she will be sharing with us in this conversation. She has been featured in the documentary films about African American art quilters, The Way Showers, and the film Skin Quilt. Hi, Cookie, and welcome to So and So.
Hi, Meg. Thank you so much for having me today.
I have so been looking forward to this conversation as I've learned about you, and you and I have had conversations. You have so much to share with us, and you are coming off an amazing weekend, which we will be talking about later in this conversation. But I'd like to start out with how this all began for you. You are mostly self-taught quilt artist,
Yeah.
and you've been a fiber artist of some sort your whole life. Now, you have a story that at 4 years old, your grandfather paid you 50 cents for the first Barbie dress you ever designed.
I did.
Would you share this with us?
My grandmother was a wonderful woman and just a great sewist. And she did all of the girls. She wasn't very into helping boys, but all of the girls had to learn how to sew. And so she cut up an old flowered sheet. And I had I'm old enough that Barbies didn't even have bendable legs back then.
I remember that too.
But she helped me to learn how to do very even gathering stitches to make the skirt kind of full. And, she was a Baptist minister's wife, so a very modest evening gown top with long sleeves. And when Granddaddy came home, I was so proud and said, "Look, like I made my dress." And he's like, "That is the finest dress I've ever seen." And when I was little, I loved quarters. And so he gave me 2 quarters for my dress, and I was very excited. And I think he kept it until he passed on, and, there was a bunch of things that were in the house. Like, oh, hey, where's this little tiny dress coming from? So that was such an honor. And it set me on the path to want to make money and do textiles.
That's pretty special. All you needed was a couple of quarters, and look what happened. Look where you are today now. You were talking about your grandmother, and your mother, your aunts, your grandmother, your great-grandmother were all experienced dressmakers, designers, master tailors. What influences did they have on your work?
I don't know if you have a picture of me. I am 4'10", and I'm a very round person with very full bosom. And so it's always been very hard to make or find clothes for me. And my mother told me when I was about 10, she said, "You've got to really master this sewing and pattern making, because by the time you're 13 or 14, I'm not going to make your clothes anymore." And at 13, I made this really, really difficult Vogue jacket pattern. And it was really close to perfect. And she was so proud of me.
Mm.
And she said, "That's it. I'm done. I don't ever have to make you another dress, anything." And so she didn't until we made my wedding dress together. And I did learn how to draft patterns from a wonderful woman named Mrs. Ruth Oblander, who did the sew fit method of pattern alteration, which is amazing. And I love it. I love creating, a beautiful garment, especially for somebody like me who is so short and so hard to fit. And just to see the delight. And I did wedding gowns for a lot of years for women who were odd sized, or I don't think of anything as an odd size, but couldn't buy off the rack or whatever, or who wanted something really special. I did for a while. I don't know if you remember in the late 90s into the early 2000s, everybody was having kind of a theme wedding like Renaissance or Star
Oh,
Trek or some
sure.
sort of cosplay thing. And I did a lot of those, and that was really, really fun. But my grandmother also taught me how to tat and crochet,
Mm-hmm.
which is just so cool. And I don't tat very much anymore because it's so hard to find a tatting channel. Um, but I'm so glad that I was able to spend that time with her from, like, I think I learned how to tat when I was like 7 or 8.
Mm.
Um, and it's just a joy. I always have to have fabric in my hands, even sitting here talking to you, I'm like beating a little something for a doll that needs to be born. So
Sure. Do you still make your own clothes?
I don't make as many of my own clothes because now I'm like totally into quilting and art quilting. So,
Mm-hmm.
but I don't dress up very much anymore. So I wear a lot of very Afrocentric kind of things. So they're
Mm-hmm.
very simple garments. Um, but I now have 3 granddaughters, and
Mm-hmm.
they are all going to get, for their first day of school, they'll all get smock dresses from Nana Cookie. And that'll be the only time I smock.
And the tradition continues. It
Yes.
carries on to new generations. That's wonderful. Cookie, how did you make the transition then to fabric art?
Um, I was like 25 years into making wedding dresses, and bridezillas were starting to get really, really on my nerves. And I could tell you stories that would curl your hair. Um, but my second marriage was, we were consciously uncoupling. And I really didn't want to try to be very happy for you getting married when I was going to be not married soon. But somebody gave me for Christmas um, the book Communion of the Spirits by Roland Freeman. And I honestly, Meg, I did not like quilters. I worked part time at a fabric store
Mm-hmm.
just to get a discount on fabric. And it never failed. I was either be going to lunch or trying to clock out for the day. And some little old lady would come with a basket, 18, 19 bolts of fabric. And they'd go, I'd like a third a yard of these and a quarter of a yard of these. And then I'm going to tell you about the little boring projects. And I was like, I can't stand this. And and I thought, I am never going to quilt. And then I saw the book Communion of the Spirits, and it was a revelation. It was, I don't know if you remember, like the first time you ever fell in love. It felt like that. It was like, oh my God, this is
Mm-hmm.
in the world, and I could learn how to do this. It was amazing. And then what really sealed the deal, um, a very dear friend of mine who became my first quilt mentor, said, well, Roland Freeman is bringing the Communion of the Spirits traveling exhibit to Charleston. And my husband at the time managed the restaurant, and Roland always creates an ancestor altar at his exhibits, and I knew where to get oyster shells because he wanted to make it thematic to Charleston, and
Mm-hmm.
so he allowed me to work with him, and we used pictures of my husband's family's ancestors, which was very sweet. His mother had passed away, and so she was able to be honored at that altar, and it was wonderful. And I must have seen that exhibit 15, 16 times. And every time you look at an art quilt, you see something new, and it was vibrant. And I met a few other quilters, and it was like a solid love affair was born. And I thought, oh, this I could do. And I'm also a very political person. And about that time, I went to a protest or a peace rally, and it was more like a protest march because we're standing on one side and I'm yelling my position, and the people on the other side are yelling their position. And it was more like we were waging peace. And that just felt really scary to me, and I realized suddenly this is not productive. But then I thought, I can say something in fabric that is still poignant, but because textiles are softer, it might make an impact in a different way. I think that art, whether it's music or dance or fiber or clay, it hits our spirit, our brain in a different part of our bodies.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we can take it in more deeply into our souls, but more gently. And so I did that. I actually, after, and I'm not going to cry, after the terrorist attack at Mother Emanuel Church in 2015,
Mm-hmm.
which was so hard because there were several people who were taken, who were my friends, including Reverend Pinckney, who was the pastor of that church. And I wanted to make quilts that would help heal the city. And so we had an exhibit called The Holy City, The Art of Unity, Love, and Resurrection. And I made two quilts. One of them was Jesus coming off the cross with Mother Emanuel in the background,
Mm-hmm.
in the colors of that AME church. Each AME church has a different color that symbolizes their particular branch. And so I did that. And I also made a quilt called A Piece of Peace. My friend had written me a poem called A Piece of Peace. And it just touched me so deeply. And so I made a quilt about that. Um, so it's been very interesting. And I said, I can go in and I can say something about the divine feminine, which some people really don't want to hear about. But if you look at it beautiful, at a beautiful, hopefully my art is beautiful, piece of work, then you might want to learn more about it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I made a quilt about Sophia, the Black Goddess of Wisdom, and lots of people didn't know that story, but they did go deeper, and I was like, this is very interesting. I love learning, and I love helping other people to learn.
Mm-hmm.
So I feel very blessed to get to do that, and I get to play with all different kinds of fabric from around the world. So,
And there's that.
yay! Yeah, and I'm a sewing machine junkie, so just sometimes you just have to go in there and just, even if you're only 20 minutes, where you can just sit at the machine. It's like a meditative prayer sometimes.
Your art inspires, it heals. You are among so many celebrated women who are fabric artists. Bisa Butler,
Oh
Sean
yeah.
Kimber. You all have so much talent, so much in common, and the universe makes no mistakes as far as getting you to where you are. Cookie, you talked about the divine feminine. Would you tell us what this is and how you celebrate it? Because you say that your work celebrates the divine feminine.
I believe that the divine feminine is kind of the feminine aspect of what I choose to call God, or the oneness, the universal spirit. Um, and before the patriarchy took over some, 2,000 years ago, much of our worship was goddess centered, because we are mothers, we are the creators, we are the life givers. And so women were venerated, and there were many more goddesses that were praised and uplifted. And that has kind of become tamped down and hidden. But I think we're having a resurgence in our culture right now. And I think that's terribly important that is happening. And so I just want to share, that particularly about African divine feminine spirits, which is how I got to mermaids. But I've created some quilts about the Black Holy Family, some of the earliest iconography of the Christ family are
Hmm.
all Black, dark skinned, including Pope John Paul's favorite quilt is Our Lady of, really long name of a city in Poland that I can't say, but it's he apparently knew he was dying and planned his own funeral. And at the funeral, or I guess where his personal family and friends were, he had requested that painting of Our Lady of Poland be hung over his coffin. And so I made a quilt that was inspired by that piece. And she's dark, and the Holy Baby is dark. And I think as African American women, we need to be remembered to that truth.
Mm-hmm.
And other people, maybe if they saw us in a different light, it might make them more willing to be understanding and warmer or more compassionate um, than we are right now. We're in a very bad place in our country, in some ways, and I think anything that we as artists, no matter what kind of artists, anything that we can do to help heal the nation, I think it's an imperative. It's almost like a lay ministry that I think we must help to do that, to heal the planet.
Again, art that heals.
Yeah.
You do a lot of curatorial work, and a primary driver of this is creating collaborative opportunities for artists of color for interpretation by all. And you've said that your overall goal is to foster introspection, communication, and provide a platform for public education. How do you do this?
Um, well, I'll talk about the North Charleston fiber art show that I've been doing for 17 years now, or next year will be our 17th year. I always pick a theme that I think will educate people about something. This year was about friendships between African American women. Well, anybody. Two of my best friends are. One of them is Jewish, and one of them is from Maine. Um, but when you have a sister bond, it's really important and really tight and very important. And I think we need to reconnect. Both of my very best friends are also my prayer partners.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and there are women who have very dear friends who are men as well. And men, I wanted them. We didn't have any men this year in the show, but to celebrate their friendships, because men don't talk about the love between two friends that is more collegial. Um, I think that's important. But I've done Black inventors, tell me a story, and I encourage people to pick a story that they knew from African lore or African American lore. I celebrated Maya Angelou when she passed away, which was really wonderful. Um, I did one called Moving Up to Higher Ground, because I thought it's kind of when all that stuff with Michael Brown first happened, and there was just a really bad summer. And I thought, what would it look like if we as a nation tried harder to move to the next level of consciousness, spirituality, where we didn't think that we were so different? What would it look like if we could bring our unity? You and I are very different, but we're very similar.
Mm-hmm.
And I think if we celebrate our sameness, but then respect and become inquisitive about our differences, um, I think that starts to heal the world. I did a show in 2018 called A Dialogue in Black and White. It was a follow-on show after the Mother Emanuel murders. And I thought, what do I want to say next? And I realized that what Martin Luther King said in 1964 was still true. Sadly, that the most segregated time of the week is 11 o'clock on Sunday morning. We don't often have deep conversation with people who don't look like us. And so what I did was I called 66 artists that I
Mm-hmm.
knew, 33 African American or artists of color, and 33 white artists. And I said, I want to have this show, and I want you to play this game with me. And the game was, Meg, I would invite you into the show, and you could not pick your partner, and you could not pick your topic. So I had little piles of the names of African American artists in one pile, the name of white artists in another pile, and then in my middle pile, I had topics, and I picked 33 topics that I thought were germane to the moment. And so I mixed everybody's names up and I picked a black artist, a white artist, and a topic. And you had agreed to play the game. So whatever the topic was, you worked on your statement about that topic and your partner worked on, you did not collaborate. But the other thing was that you had to have at least a 1 hour, and it could have been broken up over a couple hours, but I wanted everybody to have at least a 1 hour conversation with their partner about this topic
Mm-hmm.
because we sometimes come very differently. Um, one of the most interesting ones for me, and it also formed great friendships. Um, I have a very dear friend who's an African American woman who's lived in South Carolina most of her life, and her topic and the white artist was imagine. So the white artist made this wonderful, prosaic, let's have picnics, let's have hands, let's do kumbaya together. And that was her imagining whatever. And the black artist, her piece was about, I imagine and pray that my 4 black sons will grow up into adulthood.
Mm-hmm.
Very different. And the white artist was like, I had no idea. It never occurred to me that this would be something that you would have to imagine and visualize and pray for.
Mm-hmm.
Because my kids are fine. So it was very interesting to see that. And some people got topics that they were like, I don't want to do this anymore, And so it was just a really interesting way to learn. And then the thing that I liked most about that was I combined my 2 favorite things in the world. I combined really, really amazingly good art with food. I got permission to have dinners. I had 5 dinner parties over the course of the time that the show was up in the gallery. And I sat 10 people, I had 6 tables of 10 people. And if you came with your husband, girlfriend, whatever, you absolutely could not sit with them. I would sit you at a table with 9 other people that you didn't know. I appointed some people team captains, table captains, so that they could start the conversation rolling after, I'd have everybody come to the gallery like an hour and a half before the dinner started. We had to look at the art and use that as a jumping off point for talking about things, and the conversations and the friendships that came out of that. Even this many years later, there are still people who stay in contact with each other and are really trying to understand and dig deep. So it was one of the things that I'm probably most proud of that my curatorial work accomplished.
Mm-hmm.
Because I remember one of the artists from that show in 2015, I had known her for years, but I'd never met her in person. And she came this weekend with her husband and her partner from Dialogue in Black and White, who was the Caucasian person, who actually used to be my doctor, but she retired. They finally got to meet, and it was so wonderful. So it's like, oh my goodness, this is great. And like I said, friendships are being formed, understanding is being made. So I really do feel like this is my part of my ministry, is to heal and try to bring people together, but not in a very superficial way,
Mm-hmm.
but to deeply understand and see each other.
And come to the realization on their own instead of you teaching it. And you talked about identifying differences. It sounds, Cookie, like you celebrate and honor those differences as well.
Hey, it's Julian Collins from Julian Creates. You know that dream studio you have in your head with every machine, notion, and accessory you want? We've all got one. Now, I just designed mine at BerninaSweepstakes.com, and you can design your own too, and then win it. This is a chance to really create anything that's in your head that you would love to make beautiful creations in. Make sure you're in to win Bernina's Dream Studio 100K giveaway. Design your own dream studio at BerninaSweepstakes.com today. Dream it, design it, win it.
I'd like to talk about your work, and I'm going to quote you here. You said, I want to make art that challenges people to feel, art that makes you sore and a noise. I like that part. Art that challenges them to learn more about the subject and their own feelings about it. I want the viewer to come away changed after having experienced my work. I'm not at all interested in creating art that matches your furniture. And end quote. Tell us about this.
Um, that is what I think God has put on my heart as an artist, is to make work that challenges the status quo. I did a piece about Henrietta Lacks of the Immortal Cells, and I was right before or right when the movie first came out, and I my degree is in nursing. I went to Johns Hopkins, and so I had learned about this at Johns Hopkins in I graduated in 1980, but we had talked about it, but they didn't tell us the whole story. They're like, there are these immortal cells, and but they didn't say this was a Black woman who we treated, but we never told her family what happened. We never told them about the immortal cells. She died. I want to believe, because I graduated from this university, that they did the best that they can. But in 1951, there was not a lot of treatment for ovarian cancer. But still, they did not honor her by telling her family, and there's been billions of dollars worth of medical treatments that have come out of her immortal cells. As a matter of fact, her immortal cells still are alive and working and help to make the first COVID vaccines.
Oh, interesting.
If it was not for her, Jonah Salk would not have created the polio vaccine. Almost all of the AIDS drugs, the early AIDS drugs, were made experimenting with her immortal cells. So I called her, in my piece, I called her the original magical Negro, which some people took offense to. Some people, Black and white, took offense to that title. But I thought, think about this. We, in movies or whatever, the Black person is always the person who supports the white person and helps them and, makes them a better person. But you don't wholly, fully see us or know us. And that was what happened with Henrietta Lacks. And like I said, there's no medical treatment that you can say that you have had probably anywhere in the world where her immortal cells did not touch you. Your polio vaccine, your AIDS vaccine, your COVID vaccine, whatever, if you've had cancer drugs, they were used to experiment with early, so much. And so I wanted people to learn about that and to learn to respect her and to feel incensed about what happened to her family and say, this sort of treatment should not happen again. Sometimes we don't know something, and that's why we can't act on it. But if you now know the truth, you get to act on it. And like I said, I could have given you a 30-minute, very enthusiastic lecture about this, but instead I showed you the quilt, and I, in my words that I embroidered on the quilt, it's like, hey, this is what happened, and this is why I explained it this way. And people were like, oh, okay, I get it. Also, we're talking a lot now about women's rights for ownership of our own bodies. And I'm at the point where I can't even discuss it with words. I've just got to do it in art because I feel very passionate about that. And I think that most of my words about that could be interpreted as very harsh. And I don't want to be harsh. And so to create an art piece about that maybe would make people look at it in a different way. I'm starting to have some ideas about infant mortality in the African American community. Black women, no matter whether you are dirt poor or you've got a PhD, we still have much more infant and maternal mortality in this country than some emerging nations. And that's terrifying. And so if you could see that, whether you're a mother or not, whether you ever want to be a mother or not, if you look at a child who is suffering in a picture that I think that will stay in your mind. And so those are the kinds of things that I want to create art about. And of course, mermaids. And I'm working on a horse quilt for my daughter for her birthday. For her birthday. She loves horses. And it's like, I can do that. And my granddaughters both want to be dragon unicorns, right?
Of course.
So,
Of course.
so I have to sit down and work out what a dragon unicorn looks like as opposed to a plain unicorn.
We might see that for the first time in one of your quilts.
But it's got to be perfect because I've already been told, Nana Cookie, that is not a dragon unicorn.
Uh-huh.
It's like, Nana Cookie will try again.
She knows.
She does, but it's in her head, and she's not at 4. She is not incredibly verbal about telling me what a dragon unicorn looks like. So
I love it.
But we'll keep working on it, you know. And yeah, there should be joy in quilting too. I mean, celebrating, Venus and Serena Williams. Like, my God, they're the most incredible physical athletes on the planet. I can't even lift a tennis racket. So I want to see the joy that is in their physicality. I want to capture. I'm working on that. I would capture that in quilting because I think even if you don't play tennis like I don't, looking at the human body in top flight physical condition as those two women are, and Simone Biles, wow.
Mm-hmm.
You don't even have to look at their colors. Look at God made these incredible physical specimens. We have to celebrate that.
Mm-hmm.
And I want people to see that. And I was thinking of making Simone bowls, maybe just instead of depicting her as a brown-skinned African American woman, I thought, what if I made her found fabric that had all of the Olympic ring colors in it?
Mm-hmm.
Since, like, this is a champion. It doesn't matter that she started her life as a little brown girl. Now she's Olympic gold.
Mm-hmm.
Just making her whole body just gold. So I want to do kind of things like that might be edgy but gentle. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. And I'm listening to you talk about all the work that you do, and your days are full. And yet, in addition to curating and maintaining your studio practice, you teach Quilt As You Go classes to women in underserved communities. You give educational lectures for students in public schools. And you've talked about this. You donate quilts to charities serving the homeless. What have you accomplished through this work? Because this is very fulfilling work.
Shirley Chisholm said that service is the rent you pay for being on this planet.
Mm-hmm.
And I am so grateful. I was a very sickly child. I'm still a terrible, brittle asthmatic. And every day that I wake up and I'm still here, it's like, yay, God. And because I have the privilege of doing that and living, I'm in safe housing. And I know people that are my friends that I love that are in insecure housing situations. One of my favorite artists who was in the dialogue in black and white, he participated in our show and he's homeless. I mean, I know where he sleeps. Whenever I go to find him, I know exactly where he is. He sleeps in a park in downtown Charleston.
Mm-hmm.
And he doesn't have the means, but he still wants to make art. So anything that I can give to someone like him, it's what God would expect me to do. I'm going to start to work on a new project. I'm sure some of your listeners know about the Quilted Hug project.
Mm-hmm.
I am having a solo show in November, and I very much want to. I was trying to do some very quietly because I don't think you boast about what you do for the, then you're not really doing it because it's a ministry. You're doing it because you want attention. But for my solo show, I didn't get to do it for this mermaid show that's up because it was just too many moving parts. But I want to encourage friends, other other artists, fiber artists, to do quilted hugs. I was talking to someone who works in a nursing home, and not one of those fancy nursing homes like, your wealthy grandma could be in, but, the Medicare ones where this is barely enough staff and the food is not good and whatever. And they don't have warm clothes, and a lot of times their families just dump them there. And, they said, instead of lap blankets, because I was doing lap blankets and I was so proud of myself. I'm making these lap blankets and pillows. Look at me, yay. And she said, their shoulders get cold, and that makes their arthritis worse. And now that I'm getting to the age where I'm starting to have a little bit of arthritis, I know the thing that makes me be able to move through my day and pick up my needle or my crochet hook is I've got to warm up those bones. And so it's like, duh, why didn't you think of that, Cookie? So this is my new passion project, and I'm, going to ask people, if you want to help, go to your local church or nursing home or homeless shelter.
Mm-hmm.
Think about kids that are on the street because their families have put them out because they might have a different identity than their families are comfortable with.
Mm-hmm.
Those people need warmth. I can't imagine. This weekend I had this great art show, but we had essentially a subtropical storm, and I woke up in my own home and it was 42 degrees outside. And I thought, oh my gosh, I can turn on the heat. I can take a hot shower. I have a lot of blankets in my house. But then immediately I thought about my friend who lives on the street. It was raining, it was cold, it was thunder, it was lightning. How can I protect him? I don't have enough financial wherewithal to rehome him, and he doesn't want to be homed.
Mm-hmm.
But anything I can do to make him warm and more comfortable, I think that that's what our higher power demands of us almost. But the Lord loves a cheerful giver, and so I just try to be cheerful about it. And like I said, you don't make a big deal about it; you just do it because
Mm-hmm.
that's what you're supposed to do. But I'm thinking, wouldn't it be wonderful if between now and say Thanksgiving weekend, we could get like 1,000 quilted hugs done and donate them to the places in our own community? I've got a friend who's just become a doctor at the Cook County Hospital system in Chicago. And she said, oh my gosh, Vicky, this is so, and I was like, I got it. I will
Mm-hmm.
help. And like I said, that's what you do. You just do that. And so along with my own community, I'm going to try to get, a few for her, and then enlist quilting friends that I know in the Chicago area.
Sure.
Like, hey, and it's incredibly inexpensive to do this. You use scraps and fleece, or I think you can probably even just get away with using batting. But you get that polar fleece stuff, and there's a pattern online, and I made it a little simpler. You would do it like you would do a quilted sweatshirt jacket, where you just sew the cotton strips on top of the fleece, and with 2 yards, you can make 2 quilted hugs. So 2 yards of fleece right now in the summer where nobody's buying it, it's like $5-6 a yard. So for $12 and a bunch of your scraps, you can give somebody something that they will treasure, that will help them be healthier. And it'll probably bring a smile to their face because they'll know that somebody cares.
And you're giving them a hug at the same time.
And you're giving them a hug at the same time.
Now, I want to talk about validating your culture and keeping traditions alive. And you do that by weaving stories of the African American or African experience into your quilts. Now, you believe that all, as art quilters, are shifting the historical to accommodate a new application. So I want you to talk about this shift and what's the new application. And this is intriguing to me. To talk about this.
Well, my grandmother, my great grandmother, they were women of color who were essentially very poor. My grandmother on my mother's side, who is the one I talk about a lot, she had 18 children. 16 of them lived to adulthood, but they lived in a very small house, and they were poor. So my grandmother made utilitarian quilts. They weren't necessarily beautiful. Sometimes she had a tiny bit of time. She might embroider a flower or something on it, but they were made out of old feed sacks and old dresses or old blue jeans that belonged to my granddaddy's overalls or whatever. And they were utilitarian. And to me, they are beautiful, the ones that are left, because they helped keep my mother and my aunts and uncles warm so they could grow up to adulthood. So in that way, I celebrate them, just like the G-Spins quilters. But I have been able to turn that on their head. I have enough blankets, like I said, praise God that I do. But I can make a quilt celebrating Misty Copeland, or celebrating, like I said, the Williams sisters, or talking about the Me Too movement, and how we need to be able to take ownership of our bodies. Or even just, like I said, making a dragon unicorn for my granddaughters, that you can flip that script and make it delightful and happy or serious or something to learn from. And I think that, like I said, I think it's important because you can teach someone something very gently if you're doing it, with a doll or a quilt. I'm also a doll maker. And you can say something in a way that really will hit someone else's soul in a different way. So I've tried to, not honor where women like the G-Spins women and my grandmother's journey was in quilting. I'm just taking it to a next level. And I honestly believe, particularly after this amazing weekend, that this is not crafty women's work. This is fine art. And one of the things that I don't understand when people say, oh, like that's crafty or that's women's work, in order to make an art quilt, and I will direct people to my Facebook page, and you want to see art, you will just be blown away. But Michelangelo, who was a very good painter, he was okay. All he did was draw up, on a canvas, and then he painted, and then beautiful paintings, world renowned. But when I make a piece of art, I got to draw it on a piece of paper, then I've got to transfer it to the whatever background fabric, and then I've got to, create 1,000 little applique pieces or whatever. And it looks, I am not the best quilter. I know some of the quilters that I know, they are, well, Bisa Butler.
Mm-hmm.
That is on the same level as a Michelangelo or anybody. I think she can stand toe to toe with anybody, and it's all in fabric, and it's powerful.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's almost a subversive act because it's so powerful, to say, oh my goodness, and people are like, this must be a paint. No, it's not. It's all fabric. And it's teaching you, first of all, the sewing machine. Wow, what a great invention. And, from the treadle machine to the top of the line Bernina, they all have a wonderful place in the world. You can now digitize something, take a picture from your camera phone and scan it into the computer on your sewing machine and then stitch it out. What an amazing, amazing gift.
Mm-hmm.
And then we can create more and different kinds of art. I love technology. I'm not very good at it, but I love technology. And I love the new ways that we are trying to learn to create over and over again. We keep reinventing ourselves and our techniques. And it's such a joy and such an honor to, even if I'm not doing that particular, I don't do a lot of like embroidery, machine embroidery, because I don't have a machine yet. But I love it. I love watching it. I love seeing these truly masterworks of art come out of the machine or come off of somebody's, doing it by hand, or, combining stitching and painting or stitching and beading. It's such a gift to society, and like I said, we need to stop thinking of outsider art or women's art. It's just art, and it's powerful. It can be powerful art, and it can be moving art. And God bless Elias Howe, who invented the sewing machine.
Indeed.
Find his grave and put some flowers on it. Because I know my great grandmother did almost all of her work until very late in her life because she was poor, by hand. And then she had a treadle sewing machine that has somehow fallen out of the family, but that's pretty powerful. That now we can do. I can just imagine, even my grandmother who passed away in 1968. Just being able to show her, like, look at this long arm, grandmother. Look at what this can do,
It's
and how
pretty amazing.
quickly it is.
Sure.
It is. It's just like, wow, yay! I'm sorry. I'm just really enthusiastic today.
Well, let's run with that comment because at the beginning of our conversation, I mentioned that there are some other proud moments that are brand new that you would like to share, and then just a moment ago you alluded to the wonderful weekend that you just had. So, Cookie, tell us about these additional proud moments and the weekend.
Oh my goodness, I had the best. Okay, disclaimer. Other than giving birth to my children, um, and my grandchildren being born, I just had the most amazing, most glorious weekend of my life. I just curated an art show called Celebrating Black Mermaids from Africa to America. And I intentionally made sure that it opened the same weekend as the Little Mermaid movie by Disney.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason I did that is I wanted to gently counteract the patriarchal message of the movie. The Little Mermaid gives up part of her body to get out of the water to marry a prince. She was going to be queen of the ocean when her father, the king, died. And, they made it seem like this is a good thing that you'd give up your kingdom, your queendom to marry a prince. I don't think so. And I have nothing against princes, but Black mermaids have been worshipped on this planet for 4,000 years. The first images and stories of Black mermaids or any kind of mermaids showed up in 800 BCE. So mermaids have been around a long time before Hans Christian Andersen's great-great-grandparents even. And they are powerful, worshipped deities. There's a whole pantheon of orishas and mermaid spirits. So I created this art show, this fiber art show, and I asked people, please do your research. I don't want anything cutesy. I don't want anything Disney-like. I want you to go in and dig deep and learn, because I always want my artists to learn something too, if this is something that they're not familiar with. So I want them to also learn about something, and learning about the history of Black mermaids in America and in the African diaspora. Almost every culture in Africa that is surrounded by water, and even some of the landlocked ones, have stories of mermaids. Christopher Columbus claimed that he saw mermaids on his way to the New World. John Henry Hudson said that he not only did he see mermaids, but he brought mermaids aboard his ship, and his sailors, whatever, played with them. They're all different stories of people seeing or interacting with mermaids from almost the beginning of time. And in every culture that's near the water, there is some sort of water spirit, not just Black mermaids, but Native Americans have mermaid stories, and Inuits have mermaid stories, and Aboriginals have mermaid stories. So there's mermaids from all over the world, and they're not all redheaded, and they don't all look like Ariel, and they're powerful deities. And so this show had 150 pieces of art, all mermaids. There's over 92 artists from all over the country. And I told them, bring your A game or don't come. Meg, it exceeded my expectation. When you're curating a show, there's so many moving pieces, and you're like checking the artist, like, okay, here's Mary Jane's art, and it's good, and it's here, and it's safe, and they'll go on the wall in this place, and here's so and so's art, and here's so and so's art, and, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And even when you're opening the boxes, you're like, wow, this is great. But then you've got to hang the art, and then there's like dealing with the artist and helping them get there and helping them get their hotels. There's just so much paperwork and minutia. But then after everything's hung and you get that one quiet moment all by yourself in the gallery, and this gallery is 60,000 square feet. It's amazing, huge, huge building right on the water that overlooks Charleston Harbor. And you walk in and you go, oh my God. I mean, you just start, everybody just walked in the room and started crying. And, you know, it's like, there's an upstairs, there's a downstairs. And it was important, if I can keep talking about this, for me to have this at this particular gallery. God bless John Tecklenburg, our mayor. Charleston is called African Americans' Ellis Island, or Door of No Return, because according to different scholars, from 40 to 60% of every enslaved person that came to the Americas came to Charleston, South Carolina.
Mm-hmm.
Even if you ended up getting on another boat and going all the way as far down as Brazil, you still touched Charleston. And so one of the things that is documented is that the slave ships, before they sailed into Gadsden's Wharf, which is where our new International African American Museum is going to be, they would dock the boats out of sight of Gadsden's Wharf, and they would look at all the enslaved people, and the ones that were dead, they would throw them overboard, or the ones that were sick and dying that they didn't think they could, get well or whatever, they would throw them overboard, so that when they sailed into Gadsden's Wharf, it looked like they had a healthy complement of slaves. And so right where that gallery sits is right on Charleston Harbor, right about where those slave ships would have been docked and threw our ancestors overboard. And one of the main stories about Black mermaids is that they would take souls that drowned in the sea and take their souls back to the motherland so they could go on to their next journey. Mm. And so we had a very beautiful, I'll get all these videos online in the next week or so, but I had a Yoruba priest come and do a blessing to honor the ancestors. So you put fruit in the water, as a gift to the mermaids and the ancestors. And we said prayers and we sang songs and learned about this beautiful tradition. And then we just partied all weekend. I was so tired. We had on Friday, we had a film festival with 4 different Black mermaid films that have nothing to do with Disney. And we had a storyteller who told African and African American Black mermaid stories. And then on Saturday we all had breakfast together, and then we had at 2:00 our reception started, and that went from 2 to 5. And one of the artists has a beautiful home downtown and hosted us all for dinner, and we created a whole mermaid menu with food that was the color that would honor different mermaids, and it was delicious and it was fun. And then Sunday, probably one of the things that honored me more than anything, Dr. Delarine Davis from California, who teaches at the University of California, came and spoke about her work with Black mermaids in fiction and fantasy and mythology. Mm-hmm. She has a podcast called the Mer Womanist Podcast, very cool. And then Dr. Henry Druel, who is the foremost authority on the planet about Black mermaids. He started doing this research in 1964, and he's still at it today. He honored me by flying in and stayed the whole weekend and gave a beautiful teaching about mermaids and all different, these are what the mermaids are like in Brazil. These are what the mermaids are like in Portugal. This is what South African mermaids are like. And like I said, the art and getting to learn that, and we had 475 people at the opening during a tropical storm. I was so excited because I thought, Saturday morning I woke up, I was like, nobody's going to come. This is ruined. I've spent 2 years planning this, and And when I was running a little bit late and I walked in the door, and it was like, wow, I was overwhelmed. We also had a live Black Mermaid because I wanted little girls to know that you don't have to look like Ariel. And I wanted her to be darker complected, and I wanted her to be fuller of figure because I also want to knock down that style of beauty where you can only be tall and thin and blue-eyed and blonde or redheaded.
Mm-hmm.
And so my mermaid is very voluptuous, and she had so much fun, with the tail and everything. And it was just a great weekend. And like I said, the art was amazing. I mean, everybody was just walking around going, "Oh my God, look at that!" and even the other artists, because a lot of them were new to me and they hadn't seen each other before. And I asked everybody, do not post pictures of your art
Mm-hmm.
before the show opens. And so nobody but me saw most of this art, and this was awesome. Like I said, the public was so enthusiastic and grateful, and it was just wonderful. That was such a blessing. This has been a very hard year for me. My mom passed away very suddenly in October, and my brother passed away not quite as unexpectedly New Year's week. And I had been caretaker for both of them. And so to be able to grieve them, but also look forward, and during the ancestor blessing, I honored both of them. This has been such a gift. And I made new friends, and I think other people made new friends. And it was just wonderful.
You still have that glow from the weekend, and as if all of this isn't already amazing enough. Cookie, what's next for you? What's your dream?
To keep encouraging other people, not just women, but other people to learn how to quilt, to learn how to sew. It is so healing and it's so helping, and it can be such a joy. Um, in June, I'm going to teach at the Kindred Spirits Conference in Durham, North Carolina. And I do only want to teach beginning students because when I first started quilting, I would talk to people about it, and I had so many women say to me, "Oh yeah, I took a quilting class." It's like, "Oh, can I see your finished quilt?" It's under the bed. I didn't finish it because they didn't have a skill or technique that they could learn and complete something. And so the class that I'm teaching is kind of the modified cathedral window block, and you will leave with a completed pillow slip, and I will teach you how to turn that one pillow panel into a quilt that you can do in a weekend, completed with binding and everything. And so that's what I'm doing next. And then I have a solo show in November, like I said, where I'm going to do the Quilted Hug projects as my give back to the community.
Mm-hmm.
And I just want to keep creating fiber art exhibits to continue to honor this beautiful technique, and to keep uplifting African American women and African American goddess spirits, and just making little girls feel good about themselves. So that's what I want to do. And learn how to work a long arm.
And then there's that.
And then there's that, and then maybe Black Santa or Black Jesus will bring me a really cool embroidery machine by Christmas. I don't know, but it's all good, and it's all such an honor and a blessing to me to get up every morning and to get to do this and touch my fabric, and look at 1,000 different things that you can do with fabric, and then to get to share your love either through your avocation of creating, something for the homeless or whatever, or to teach new people how to do this skill. I'm sorry, I'm just really way too enthusiastic, I think, about this.
I don't think you can be too enthusiastic. It's infectious just to listen to the joy that you feel. So here is my final question for you. We talked about a lot of things. Is there any question I didn't ask that you wish I had?
Oh, wow. I think you covered everything. You didn't ask about my grandchildren,
That's a whole nother episode.
but that's another episode. I have 3 granddaughters who will be learning how to quilt and sew very soon.
And we are going to want to see that dragon unicorn. I'm going to be looking for a picture of that.
I'm going to keep trying to work on it in between doing the stuff that pays Nana so that I can buy fabric for dragon unicorns. But thank you so much, Meg. This was so much fun.
Oh, Cookie, this has been a wonderful conversation. I want to thank you so very much for sharing your story with us today. And I know those who have sat with us today and listened to this would love to reach out to you. So what's the best way for them to do that?
Oh, I have a website, but it's probably easier to catch me by my email. Do check my email. My email is COOKIES as in Sam, EWS as in Sam again, 1960 at Gmail. And my website that needs to be updated, especially now. It's cookiesewsquilts.com. You could also find me on Facebook under my real name, Toria Washington. I think I have a Cookie Washington as well. And on Instagram at Cookie Sews. So lots of different ways to get in touch with me. And I love talking to way too much to everybody about quilting and sewing and crochet. Oh my goodness. In this show that I just had, there were crocheted mermaids. It was so cool.
Amazing.
It was amazing. Oh, that's the last thing that you didn't ask me that I'd love to say. The Celebrating Black Mermaids from Africa to America is on view from now until July 9th at the City Gallery at Joe Riley Park, Waterfront Park in Charleston, South Carolina. So that was the last thing I would want to say.
You know, I have to share a quick story, and I've shared this with you, but those sitting with us today, I found Cookie through somebody that I met at QuiltCon in Atlanta earlier this year. And it was a stranger who found out about this podcast and said, "You must find Cookie Washington. She is someone who absolutely needs to be on your podcast." And through a little bit of sleuthing, I did find Cookie Washington, who responded immediately. And that's what brought us to this conversation today. So this podcast is about inspiration and excitement and community. And it was that community, Cookie, that brought us together and brought you to everybody today. So I am deeply grateful for your time. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much, Meg. And I hope to see you in Charleston one day.
I'll look forward to that. Well, there you have it. Another story about someone just like you, someone for whom sewing and quilting is so much more than a hobby. It's a way of life. It's a connection to something bigger. If you know someone you think has an outstanding story, a story that should be shared on this podcast, please drop me a note to meg@soandsopodcast.com or complete the form on our website. Be sure to subscribe to, review, and rate this podcast on your favorite platform, and visit our website, soandsopodcast.com, for more information about today's and all of our guests. That's SEWANDSO podcast.com. And finally, I want to thank Bernina for making this program possible. I'm Meg Goodman, and I look forward to you joining us next time on So and So.